12-year-old Amara Johnson pressed her small hands against the airplane window, her fingers trembling as she formed the international distress signal she'd learned in school just weeks before. The SOS pattern, 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short, echoed softly against the glass as tears streamed down her face. She had been missing for 18 hours, taken from her grandmother's front yard in Oakland while waiting for the school bus. Now 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert, she was trapped on a private jet with 2 men who had promised to take her home but were flying in the wrong direction. What Amara didn't know was that former UFC champion Ronda Rousey was in the cockpit of a nearby aircraft, and what happened next would prove that sometimes heroes appear exactly when you need them most. If this story already has your heart racing, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because what Ronda did next shows why real champions fight their biggest battles outside the ring. Smash that like button if you believe in everyday heroes who refuse to look the other way. Ronda Rousey was piloting her private Cessna Citation back to Los Angeles after a charity event in Reno, enjoying the rare, peaceful moments that flying provided. The former Olympic judoka and UFC bantamweight champion had taken up aviation as a way to find solitude away from the spotlight that had defined her life for over a decade. At 36, she had traded the octagon for movie sets and business ventures, but the fighter's instincts that had made her a champion never truly left her. The air traffic control chatter was routine until a transmission from a nearby corporate jet caught her attention. The pilot was requesting an unusual flight path change, deviating from the standard Los Angeles approach to head toward a small airstrip near the Mexican border. Something in the pilot's voice, a tension that didn't match the casual nature of the request, triggered the same intuition that had helped Rousey anticipate her opponent's moves in the ring. Rousey adjusted her flight path to get a visual on the other aircraft, a sleek Gulfstream G650 that was flying about 2 miles to her east. Through her binoculars, she could see the jet clearly, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. But one window was different. In the rear passenger section, she could see movement, someone pressing against the glass in a rhythmic pattern that made her pilot training kick into high alert. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone who had studied emergency protocols. 3 short signals, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. Someone on that plane was in distress, and they were trying to communicate with the outside world in the only way they could. Rousey's hands tightened on the controls as she realized she might be witnessing a kidnapping in progress. Amara had learned about the SOS signal in her 6th grade safety class just 3 weeks earlier. Mrs. Patterson had taught the students about emergency communication, explaining how the simple pattern could save lives if they were ever in danger. Amara had never imagined she would need to use it, especially not while trapped on an airplane with men who claimed to be taking her to see her mother in Los Angeles, but whose whispered conversations suggested something far more sinister. The men had approached her that morning while she waited for bus 47 outside her grandmother's house. They had shown her a photo of her mother, who had been deployed overseas with the army for 8 months, and claimed there had been an accident. "Your mom is in the hospital," the taller man had said, his voice gentle but his eyes cold. "She asked us to bring you to her. We need to hurry." Amara's grandmother was inside getting ready for work, and the men seemed to know exactly when she would be alone. They had a car waiting, official-looking badges, and a story that explained why there hadn't been time to call her grandmother first. By the time Amara realized something was wrong, she was already at a small airport, being hustled onto a private jet by men whose gentle facade had disappeared entirely. Rousey immediately contacted air traffic control, reporting the distress signal she was observing. But the response was frustratingly bureaucratic. Without concrete evidence of a crime, there was little they could do to force the aircraft to land. The Gulfstream was flying legally, its flight plan was properly filed, and the pilot was responding normally to all communications. The SOS signal could be explained away as a child playing against a window. But Rousey knew what she had seen, and her fighter's instincts told her that a child's life was in danger. She made a decision that would later be called both reckless and heroic. She was going to force that plane to land, using whatever means necessary. Using her radio, Rousey contacted the Gulfstream directly, identifying herself and requesting to speak with the pilot about a mechanical issue she had observed with their aircraft. The conversation that followed was tense, with the pilot insisting everything was normal, while Rousey pressed for details about his passengers and destination. She could hear stress in his voice, the kind of pressure that came from operating outside the law. Meanwhile, Amara continued her desperate signaling, her small hands now raw from pressing against the window. She had overheard enough of the men's conversation to understand that she wasn't being taken to her mother. Words like buyer, payment, and delivery had made it clear that she was being trafficked, sold to someone who would hurt her in ways her 12-year-old mind couldn't fully comprehend, but instinctively feared. You're probably wondering how Ronda could possibly stop a plane in mid-air, right? If this incredible rescue story has you as captivated as it had aviation authorities across 3 states, write "hero" in the comments. Because what she did next required the same courage that made her a world champion. Rousey's plan was audacious and dangerous. Using her superior aircraft handling skills, she began to shadow the Gulfstream, flying close enough to make the pilot nervous, but not close enough to create a collision risk. She maintained radio contact, claiming she could see fuel leaking from their aircraft and insisting they needed to land immediately for safety inspection. The psychological pressure was intense. The Gulfstream pilot found himself being escorted by an aircraft piloted by someone who clearly knew what they were doing, someone who wasn't going to be deterred by standard brush-off techniques. Rousey's reputation as a fighter who never backed down was serving her well at 30,000 feet. When the Gulfstream pilot tried to lose her by changing altitude and direction, Rousey matched every maneuver. Her years of training in combat sports had taught her to read opponents, to anticipate their moves and counter them before they could gain advantage. She was applying those same skills to aerial combat, using her aircraft as an extension of her will to protect an innocent child. The breakthrough came when Rousey managed to position her aircraft where Amara could see her through the window. The little girl's eyes went wide when she realized that someone had noticed her distress signal, that help was literally flying alongside her prison. Rousey held up a sign she had quickly written on her flight chart. "Help is coming." Amara's renewed hope gave her courage to do something that would provide the evidence authorities needed. She managed to open the small emergency window latch, a feature designed to provide ventilation in case of cabin pressure loss, and dropped out a piece of paper with her name and "Help Me" written in crayon. The paper fluttered away in the aircraft's slipstream, but Rousey saw it and immediately radioed the details to air traffic control. The game changed when FBI agents monitoring aviation communications recognized Rousey's tail number and realized that a former world champion was essentially conducting an aerial citizen's arrest. Agent Maria Santos, who had been tracking a human trafficking ring operating out of small airports in California and Nevada, immediately understood the significance of what was happening. The Gulfstream was ordered to land at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, where FBI agents and local police were waiting. The pilot initially refused, claiming mechanical issues that prevented safe landing, but Rousey's continued presence made it clear that his aircraft was under surveillance by someone who wouldn't be fooled by standard evasion tactics. When the Gulfstream finally touched down, surrounded by law enforcement vehicles, the 2 men aboard were arrested on charges of kidnapping, human trafficking, and conspiracy. The pilot, who had been paid $50,000 to fly the cargo to a remote airstrip in Mexico, cooperated with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. Amara was reunited with her grandmother within hours, but the trauma of her 18-hour ordeal would take much longer to heal. The little girl, who had been brave enough to signal for help while trapped at 30,000 feet, would need months of counseling to recover from the psychological impact of her kidnapping. The investigation that followed Amara's rescue revealed a sophisticated trafficking network that had been operating for years, using private aircraft to transport victims across state and international borders. The men who had taken Amara were part of a larger organization that specifically targeted children from military families, knowing that deployed parents couldn't immediately verify their children's safety. Rousey's intervention had not only saved Amara, but had provided law enforcement with the break they needed to dismantle an entire criminal enterprise. The evidence recovered from the Gulf Stream led to arrests in 6 states and the rescue of 11 other children who had been reported missing over the previous 2 years. The media attention that followed was intense, but Rousey handled it with the same focus she had brought to her fighting career. She used the spotlight to raise awareness about human trafficking, particularly the vulnerability of children from military families whose parents were deployed overseas. Her foundation established a program to teach children advanced safety techniques, including the SOS signal that had saved Amara's life. Amara's recovery was remarkable, aided by the knowledge that her courage in signaling for help had led to the rescue of other children. She became an advocate for aviation safety education, working with Rousey's foundation to teach other kids how to recognize danger and communicate distress. The shy 12-year-old, who had been targeted because she seemed vulnerable, grew into a confident young woman who refused to be defined by her trauma. The Federal Aviation Administration used the case to update protocols for responding to distress signals observed by civilian pilots. Rousey's actions, while technically outside normal procedures, had demonstrated the importance of trusting experienced aviators' instincts when children's lives were at stake. New training programs were developed to help air traffic controllers and law enforcement respond more quickly to reports of suspected trafficking. The Gulfstream pilot, facing life in prison, provided detailed information about the trafficking network's operations. His testimony revealed how the organization had exploited weaknesses in private aviation security, using legitimate-appearing flight plans to transport victims without triggering law enforcement attention. The case led to significant improvements in monitoring private aircraft movements, particularly flights to remote airstrips near international borders. Rousey never sought recognition for her actions that day, but the aviation community honored her with awards for courage and quick thinking under pressure. More importantly to her, Amara's family became like extended family, with the former champion attending the girl's graduation from high school and later her acceptance to college on a full scholarship. The bond between Rousey and Amara grew stronger over the years, built on the shared understanding of what it meant to fight when everything was on the line. Rousey had taught Amara that being a champion wasn't about winning in a ring or octagon. It was about standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, even when the odds seemed impossible. Years later, when Amara graduated from the FBI Academy and became a special agent specializing in crimes against children, she carried with her the lesson she had learned at 30,000 feet. That heroes come in many forms, and sometimes the person who saves your life is someone you've never met, who simply refuses to look the other way when they see someone in trouble. The case became a landmark in aviation law enforcement, cited in training manuals and legal precedents for civilian intervention in suspected crimes. But for those who lived through it, the technical and legal aspects mattered less than the simple truth that one person's courage to act had saved a child's life and brought down a criminal network that had destroyed countless families. What moves me most about this story is how it shows that heroism isn't about having superpowers or special training. It's about recognizing when someone needs help and refusing to walk away. Ronda Rousey could have assumed that the SOS signal was just a child playing, could have minded her own business and continued her flight home. Instead, she trusted her instincts and used her skills to save a life, proving that real champions fight their most important battles outside the spotlight. If Ronda and Amara's incredible story of courage and quick thinking touched your heart the way it touched millions around the world, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to decide whether to get involved when someone else was in danger? What would you have done in Ronda's position? Share your thoughts, because sometimes the most important victories happen when we choose to be heroes for someone we've never met.